Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey everyone, it's your host Adam Koralik here. How are you guys doing? Welcome to the Figure It Outcast. This is for, what is it, April already? Wow. April 2025. This is, of course, a Patreon-backed podcast, and if you follow us, if you like the video, comment down below, subscribe, we appreciate that. But if you can also check out social media stuff like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, of course, Spreadshirt, my travel channel, I appreciate that. But on Patreon specifically, if you follow this or follow us on Patreon, you get early access to this. You also can get shout-outs, you can pick subjects, you can even be on this podcast if you want to, and of course, you're just keeping the channel alive, supporting it. I really appreciate that. And one such person is, of course, you, Abdullah. Sorry, Abdullah, for keeping you in the dark there. How are you doing?
No worries. I'm doing well. I'm glad to be back as always. And ready for this one's going to be interesting.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. So, basically, all right. So, just so that you guys want to see how the sausage is made, we obviously record this very early on in the month, and then it's released publicly to the majority of you near the end of the month. So, obviously, a lot of things can change with that, and we always knew that going into this format. However, today is a little bit more interesting because at the time we're recording it, I just released my Switch 2 video to Patreon backers, like the reaction to the Nintendo Direct, all that sort of stuff, but it has not yet gone to the public, so I don't know what anybody thinks of my statements. So more or less we're going to be kind of having the same discussion with certain spicy additives, because now I'm going to have Abdullah to bounce off of here, so I appreciate Abdullah for you being patient about that. But basically I guess we should just start at the beginning there. You want to just talk about Switch 2? Let's just jump into it.
Maybe since you already made the video, you probably have a better way to start it off.
Okay, all right.
And then we just go back and forth from there.
We can do that. Let's give the little history lesson here, right? Okay, so we are recording this about a week into April. The second day of April, April 2nd, Nintendo did a Nintendo Direct for whatever it was. It was at least an hour, if not like 2. Honestly, I don't remember. Where they basically just went over a lot of the details of the Nintendo Switch 2. They opened it by showing us Mario Kart World, which actually looked like a really awesome game, I have to admit that. And then they talked about a lot of details of the system. Where it's going to be upgraded. It looks like it has a headphone jack even, which is kind of cool. It's going to have a camera. Nintendo finally realized the concept of game chat is a thing. But it feels more like an evolution of the Nintendo Switch, less so than a brand new console. We can have that discussion separately. They're just sticking to like what they actually showed us. They obviously showed a bunch of different games from third-party developers. They showed like Donkey Kong is making a return, kind of like a Donkey Kong 64 type of sequel is happening, as well as expansions on pre-existing games, such as updated versions of both Zelda games that were on the Switch, so Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, as well as other like updates, and like Metroid Prime 4 is going to become a reality, and is of course going to have a Switch 2 version, etc. They addressed a few other details such as backwards compatibility. It will in fact be backwards compatible. However, there was a big asterisk with that, which they did not dive into. They revealed that the release date is June 5th, 2025, and within the Direct itself, they did not talk about pricing. Did you watch it, Abdullah? Did you see this whole thing?
To be honest with you, I didn't watch the full Direct more than read about the whole Direct. So, I watched some part of it and read about most parts.
That's fine. I just wanted to see if you had actually watched it, because what I just said is where it ended. They were just like, that's all they told us. Within like minutes of it ending, we started, like, I have to admit, watching it, I was like, all right, I'm kind of on board for this. Like, it doesn't feel like a whole new console experience. It doesn't feel like crazy different or anything like that. But that's all right. I'm kind of digging this. I like some of these games. Mario Kart World looks great. So they got third-party developers are excited, etc., etc. So I was kind of in there. And very quickly after that, we were getting a lot of updates about price points, things like potential region locking, how the carts actually work, etc., that made me start losing a lot of interest. I was posting about it on Twitter and Facebook and stuff, trying to keep people as up to date as possible, but then like real life got in the way and I couldn't really sit there doing that all day. But I guess where I would say I am now is a little less excited than I was. But before I continue to delve into all that, Switch. I want to get Switch thoughts from you, Abdullah, about like what your Switch 2 thoughts. What did you think of all this?
Well, of course, first of all, being Nintendo oriented, this is of course of interest to me, but I wouldn't be uh I'm not surprised that I wasn't as hyped for it as I was for the original Switch. Which I think is expected because, as you said, it's more of an evolution to it. Because if you see the way it came from GameCube to Wii, Wii U, Switch, the whole innovation thing happened. Like there's a big change that happens with the way they make the console or the way you play the games. They have like an innovative idea, but this time, as you clearly said, it's a more of an evolution to the console. I mean, it makes sense why it's an evolution, even the Switch is very successful. So it kind of makes sense. So uh, I'm, I'm, I'm excited in general, yes, but not to that level where the level of a whole new console. I feel that this is just, as you said, an upgrade. Kind of, I'm looking at a PS4, PS4 Pro kind of thing. Higher than that, but lower than full on hype. It's a weird position to be honest. Where I am for the Switch 2, but I'm not eager to get it on the first day. I would love to if I had the chance, but I'm not gonna run to do that. I'm just gonna take it slow because the Switch library is already huge. So that's my essential thoughts on it. It's
Okay.
something very interesting, yeah, but uh, not too hyped for it, but very happy about it as well.
Okay, so that tracks. You're about how old?
I'm almost 26.
Okay, so that tracks with the age, where you're not as excited about stuff that used to be as you were a kid. Like I'm 38, so I'm a jaded old man. So I'm like, whatever, it's just another thing that happens now.
Yeah, I mean when the Switch came, I was around 17. Something.
Yeah, you would have been like 18 when that thing came out, man. That's the tail end, absolute tail end extremity of childhood for you. Like that's right where it cuts off, is that border. So it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, if we're talking about like normal people cycles as opposed to us, we're basically big man children, and that's fine. But basically, like, my reasons for not being super excited about it, you can partially factor in my age, but other factors is really the hardware itself is kind of what bothers me and all the circumstances around it. Not the games. The games are the one thing that's keeping me kind of clinging to it. Like I think
Actually,
that,
the games make it. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
yeah, the like Mario Kart World to me looks amazing. Like that looks like a really fun time. That's something I genuinely want to experience. That isn't just Mario Kart. Like that's just like the title is perfect. It's the world of Mario Kart. Like there's so much more to expand on than just racing. And I think that looks incredible, and I genuinely want to play that. Nintendo's completely hit it out of the park on the actual game front. What they did kind of screw up was basically everything else. Like, to me, as a guy who really loves consoles, console history, collecting consoles, telling their story, the Switch 2 is not exciting. It is not really a new platform so much it is just an upgraded version. I think I've said this before in the past, but it's basically a physical firmware update. It's kind of going like Xbox One to Xbox Series X. Essentially, it's the same ecosystem. It supports all the same stuff, basically. And some stuff doesn't work, whatever. But then, fine, who cares? You're going to get new content. Oh, look, the resolution is running a little higher, frame rate's better, etc. We just need to upgrade the tech. But we're trying to intentionally make this feel like nothing has really changed. I mean, to the point where they just sequelize the name. And I've said this for years. I have the same issue with the PlayStation 2, going that far back. I find that when you're creating a product that is meant to be the epitome of creativity, having such a lackluster name that is just a sequel, like, yeah, it's good for marketing, but it does fundamentally take away from charm. Like, the charm of, like, what the system is the idea of being a creative box for people to have stories and adventures. It sounds so soulless and corporate, and that kind of symbolizes it a little bit to me, because Nintendo, clearly they're doing the right thing financially speaking. Like, people are going to buy it for that reason alone, but it bothers me all the other circumstances around it. Like, people laugh about how Nintendo just discovered game chat, whatever. I don't care about any of that. The camera, sure, it's a bonus feature for some games, and maybe, you know, game chat itself, fine, whatever. I don't really care. It wasn't even the pricing that necessarily bothers me, because do you want to delve into that? How much of this have you read up on?
Well, in terms of pricing, I'm not surprised. It's not.
I'm not either. I'm not either.
Yeah, it's.
But a lot of people
expected.
are.
Yeah, a lot of people complained mostly about the game prices.
Yeah, no, I've heard a lot of both, but a lot of people who complain about pricing, I'm going to go so far as to say they're not economists, and so they don't really know why anything costs anything. Like, I have, this is not a joke, I've had legitimate arguments with people in my, like, Discord server, for example, where they claim that everything should just be free, like, as if that makes any sense. Like, people are nuts when it comes to the concept of money. They don't usually understand how it actually works.
Yeah, but if you have just basic background, yeah. Yeah, and if you have a basic background,
yeah. But
you'll just.
But here's the other thing: some people, like, which you would think of as more of a surface level reason. People will be like, "Oh, it should really only be like $250 because, like, you know, that's what a game console should cost." But unfortunately, a lot of people who are saying that are people who really have not left the 1990s yet. And I say this as someone who makes a career out of talking about stuff from the 1990s. But I also understood economies. You know, like, when you compare modern prices on something like $450, which sounds like, at least within the US, what the intended ESRB, not ESRB, MSRP rate, price point of the Switch is supposed to be, without a game, mind you. When you take that and adjust it for inflation compared to something from the 90s, it's actually cheaper than a lot of stuff that would have launched back then, like the Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, whatever it is. And so people don't really like hearing that, because not everybody's an economist. Now, if you want to go further to it, you can also point out that the buying power of the dollar has also shrunk. So, meaning people don't make as much money as they used to relative to how much money is actually available. I mean, economists, I don't think I need to teach you, Abdullah, that economics is complicated. But the point is, $450 for the system is not really that crazy or unreasonable. I think it's just the psychological ramification of particularly the older audience not wanting to hear that the new Nintendo costs $450. I think that's about as surface level as it gets. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. If you look at surface level, with people look at it like that, you would get those complaints. But then again, if you just have a generic understanding of what's going on, you won't be that surprised. You'd be like, okay, this is expected. And even with the game price, I mean, the game prices, we could talk maybe later about that.
Oh, we do need to talk about the games, because the games are the biggest issue I have. But first continue your point.
Yeah, I mean, with the games, yeah, I kind of see where you could make some pointers maybe here and there. But with the console itself, I'm fine with the price. Well, I'm not gonna say it's a great price, nor something unexpected. It's completely expected and within the range. And they also, I think, so because of the prices and all that, I think in Japan there will be a model that's dedicated for it, right? So
yeah, we need to address that, because inevitably that's going to come up. There's going to be people say, like, oh, Nintendo's just being greedy because in Japan it only costs $300 or whatever it is. Shall we, my friend, shall we delve into why this is, for those who think they're experts but know nothing on the subject?
Yeah, I guess we should.
I only say this with such a, shall we say, a spicy attitude, because I've had a lot of arguments this week with pseudo-intellectuals on particularly Twitter, who think they know economics particularly well without knowing anything about how the world actually works. So apologize to anybody who took a little slight at that. I didn't mean to offend you directly. But basically, here's the thing with Japan. Japan, completely detached from the Nintendo Switch and anything that is Nintendo, is going through an economic crisis that is pretty extreme. And it largely has to do with the fact that the yen as a currency has more or less it's more or less completely collapsed. Most of their problems stem from the fact that their demographics has become really bad. So you might have heard casually over the last few years that there's a lot of countries like South Korea and Japan that are just getting really old. And what that actually means is life expectancy is getting older. And in certain countries, not the United States, but a lot of countries have basically social safety nets for the elderly. Basically, money is set aside to take care of people as they get older. Now, they're getting older, and medical advances are keeping people around longer, which is all good, except that it's also creating a separate situation where there isn't enough resources to take care of them. That's one side of it. Couple that with the fact that since the end of the Second World War, society has changed around the world for the most part. Pre-World War II, most people on this planet lived on farms, and they had like 10 kids. And those kids were basically labor that worked in those farms. That was why you had so many kids. And of course, because of lack of medical technology, a lot of them would die, but you just have so many damn kids. Then, after the war, a lot changed. People started moving into cities. And that happened the world over. People industrialized. The problem is when you do that, instead of having a ton of kids running around a farm doing free labor for you, you now have to work more of an office type of job. You don't do that kind of labor work. And you realize you can't have 10 kids because instead of them being free labor, they're now a bunch of financial drains because they can't contribute to that income. And therefore, you can't afford to have that many kids. And people aren't stupid, so they just don't have that many kids. Fast forward to now, where your average couple, most people, I think Gen Z is like the lowest generation ever produced since we've kept track of it. And we don't know yet about Gen Alpha, which is the kids of millennials. My point is, we have a ton of elderly. And we have far fewer younger people. Your younger people matter because they're the ones that drive the economies of any country. They're the ones buying things. They're the ones buying homes, cars, etc. They're also the ones who are the labor pool, the tax pool. All these things really matter. Now, what does this have to do with the Nintendo Switch 2? The problem is Japan's pyramid of demographics, and if you visualize a pyramid, the top would be the thin point, the bottom is the big point. The top should be elderly, and the bottom should be like babies, where there's just the majority of them, because the natural course of time, people die off, and people replace them, right? The problem is because of everything I just described, that pyramid is flipped essentially upside down, where the pointy end is at the bottom, where they have very few young people, but they have a ton of old people. So when the majority of your society is in retirement and isn't working and can't produce and can't build things, what do? Your economy starts to collapse in on itself. And that is why the yen is tanking so bad. And it's only getting exacerbated because with what little youth they have, they are putting them in a situation where they're like, well, we don't really have a whole lot of industry anymore because we kind of moved all that to China and Vietnam, India, Mexico, etc. So we're going to start having everybody start learning better proficiency in English, and then they'll just be, working in hotels and the hospitality industry. Which then makes it even worse because guys like you and me, Abdullah, we have a much easier time going to Japan to be there as tourists, buy up all their stuff, which sounds pretty good, like we're pumping money in their economy. But really, their economy and their value is tanking so badly that we're essentially just taking advantage of that situation. And because they need more demand to deal with tourists, again, what few youth they have, they put in hospitality. Thus, there's even less people to do labor jobs, making it worse and worse. It's like an endless cycle. So the reason I say all of this is that's where the Switch 2 is. The Japanese populace, their buying power of the yen, you can look at, like, you can go to Google right now, go to a currency converter, like 100 yen, how much is that in a dollar? And it used to be like 100 yen was a dollar. Then it became 108 yen, then 110 yen. Now it's like 160 yen to a dollar. So if you're sitting there as an American thinking, okay, well, I earn minimum wage, which is like, whatever, 10 bucks an hour. I don't even know what it is, to be honest with you, because I've been working YouTube so damn long. But if you work a minimum wage job at $10 an hour, you might be thinking, okay, well, then they just get that exact same amount of money in yen, right? And then so they have the same buying power. That's not true. It's actually far, far lower. The buying power of the yen locally has to be far cheaper for society to function. So I'm sure, Abdullah, that if you've ever looked on the internet and been like, you see these memes and like news reports like, oh, food is so cheap in Japan, you can get a whole meal for $3. Yes, because it's converted to $3 for you as a tourist. But to the locals, that's like paying $15 for a meal because of how little of their buying power is. This is the basis of economics. Now, there's a lot of countries around the world that deal with this exact same thing. What makes Japan unique is, of course, where is Nintendo from? Japan. And thus, the system must come out there. It must be a success there. It must work. But the locals could never afford a $450 game console these days. So it has to be sold at a loss just to make it even remotely palatable. Now, to Nintendo's credit, I guess, they recognize that, hence they're allowing that to exist. But it does already present that problem. And I had this argument with people in Discord. They're like, how come they get it so much cheaper? I want to just exploit that. I'm going to import it. Do you think Nintendo didn't know you were thinking of doing that? Once again, trying to take advantage of that exact system that is causing them so many problems? That's why.
And so they did what they did.
Yeah, they did what they did. That's why they region locked that version of the system. And that's why they're region locking those versions of the games. And because Japan is going to exist in its own weird bubble, I think we're kind of taking a step backwards as far as like the last few generations. Not only have games been region free, but because this was actually a benefit of digital technology. When you would put it in, there could be patches and updates that would give you languages from all across, depending on what version you had. You could basically buy the Japanese version, download a patch when you put it in the American system, and it would play in English. Not in every case, obviously, but in a lot it would be possible. Japan is now going to exist in an ecosystem where a lot of their stuff is just not going to work outside of Japan, which does really suck. But rather than just assume the clickbait headline of Japan gets cheaper games, that's not the truth. Trust me. If you live in Europe or North America or Australia, etc., trust me when I say you would not really want to trade your living situation for theirs right now. You see the surface meme-like clickbait version of what Japan is. When you go there, you will enjoy it as a tourist. But if you had to live in that society, you would realize just how far your money does not go locally. The yen, I mean. Anyway, that's just I'm going to get off my soapbox now.
There's nothing we can do about it. It's not going to give an advantage or something. You can't get it cheaper, as you said. It doesn't really... Unless you're a collector, then you just want it because it's a variant, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Like, basically what I'm saying is, don't expect to be like, I'm going to be the guy who imports the $300 version because I'm so much smarter. Nobody else would have thought of that. Trust me, they know you're thinking of doing that, and it's not going to work out for you.
Unless you speak Japanese. So
yeah, exactly. If you speak Japanese, great. You're good. You're fine. But I wager to bet most people who don't understand the basics of this argument also don't speak Japanese. That's all. Okay, so that's kind of all I have to say on that part of it. Where that does create problems, let's talk about the games, because that's really what I wanted to address the most here, at least as far as the game cards. Now, how much of this have you paid attention to?
More of complaints that it's just so high. But honestly, I haven't read a lot about the details of the reasoning of why it's high or not. I haven't read much about it, but I don't know.
Let me break that down.
Why
it's getting. If you're referring to it being high, I assume you mean the price points. That largely has to boil down to what we've already been discussing, which is inflation. And I mean, keep in mind, like, I think Mario Kart World is the extreme one where they're talking about it being like $80 to $90 USD. Meanwhile, games in the early 90s cost the same amount. We've always kind of mentally assumed it was 60, but that really hasn't been true for a long time.
We have to scale it.
Say again?
We have to scale it
Precisely.
according to where you
Inflation
live.
and buying power. Those two struggles are annoying, but either way, that's an extreme case. I guess most of the time it's expected to hover around 70, which again, I think is not so much the actual buying power or value of the dollar again, to Americans, that is really the problem. I think it's just the psychological impact of hearing it cost that much. I think that's more what people are having an issue with. They just
It's because...
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's also related to the fact that when you get the console, that's just a one-time purchase. But with the games, you're gonna want to buy more and more games. So you're like, my God, I used to pay 60 per game, and I want X amount of games. Now I have to pay like 20, 30 more to get those, like, per game, because that's where the annoying part comes.
You probably have actually been spending less money. It's just it sounds like more because the number is higher, but the value of it is lower. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. That's economics. We've spent way too much time talking about that. Where I had a bigger concern with this was the actual carts and how they hold data. So here's how I understand this to work. There are effectively a few different versions. There's two base concepts. There is a Switch cart or Switch 2 cart that effectively operates kind of like an Xbox One disc or a PS4 disc or whatever, where it's a way for the system to recognize what the title is, but contains almost no actual data for the game. It just goes into the cloud and downloads whatever you need, and you have to sit there and wait for that to occur. I obviously have a lot of problems with that, but that's the version of the world we live in. It's the version of the world we chose to take the path of because people just did not care enough about consumer rights or the right of property. Fine. The alternative is to have the secondary version, which is going to exist solely because I feel like they only did it because Nintendo wanted to be able to claim they support physical media, which is you can have versions of the carts that actually have memory on them. So far, we know of 64 gigabytes being the highest capacity card. There are rumors, again, rumors, so take it with a grain of salt, that there might be a 128 gigabyte card that only Nintendo themselves has access to for the time being. But most carts will, be closer to like 32 gigabytes maximum storage. The idea there is developers can choose to put their games on the carts instead of having them be downloaded. And the benefit of that to the company is effectively nothing. Because the higher up the data storage is on the cartridge, the more they cost to produce, thus lower profits for the company. So if you are the company that's like, okay, well, everybody kind of expects us to just download our titles. We're just going to do the cheapo cart that really has no data on it. And effectively, it's just a download key, which is effectively just a digital version of the game with a little worthless piece of plastic associated with it. So the true physical editions, which is the kind of thing I imagine like limited run games and so on and so forth might be using, that makes sense to me. CD Projekt Red is the one who made it apparent to us that 64 gigabytes is basically the max, because that's effectively where they're putting like Cyberpunk. They're going to put it on that, and it just barely fits apparently, but it will work. That is in of itself a little stressful because you won't really know at any given time, unless they very clearly market, which games are like that. But to be fair, this is effectively how the PS5, Xbox Series X, hell, the Xbox One and PS4 have worked for 12 years. So this isn't really new. It's just sad with Nintendo. Anyway, thoughts?
Can't add much, honestly. That's it's just how it is. It can't do anything about it.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, there really.
But I mean, people are gonna complain anyways, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So whatever. We could obviously elaborate on that for like hours, but I'm trying to get us to move forward here. So the last point I want to make, at least in this, unless you have anything else to add, is let's talk about Switch 1 compatibility.
Oh, Switch 1 compatibility. Well, they said most of them are gonna work.
Right. So
and
there's
yeah,
more to it than that, but go ahead.
yeah, most of them are gonna work, and they're also releasing enhanced version of some games.
Yes, that is true. Yes.
So I don't know whether those enhanced versions, does that mean the original one will work, or you have to use the enhanced version, buy it or something. Um,
I can address both of those points.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so let's start with the enhanced thing. So apparently what Nintendo is going to do is basically do two versions of the enhanced stuff. So let's take like Breath of the Wild, because we know that's going to be one of them. They're going to do two versions. One, if you already own the original Switch version, you can pop it in there and you can buy the upgrade pack for Switch 2, which effectively just gives you like a higher frame rate, higher resolution, etc. And you can pay like $15. It's effectively a digital download that just connects onto your pre-existing version of the game. I imagine that's the way they want to sell it. That's the more intended version. However, they are also going to do a separate Switch 2 edition of the game that is the full retail price of a new game that includes that game as well as the patch. Now, this is where having different versions of the carts is significant, because there would be no incentive to have just a cart with no data on it that just allows you to download the update and nothing more. So in Nintendo's case, at least with that game, it sounds like they intend to do like the definitive edition that's actually on the cart for stuff like that. However, they don't necessarily have to adhere to that rule. We also know, and I think this came out like the other day, that the Zelda games with their DLC, like Breath of the Wild, will not actually be included in these upgrade editions, which is kind of insane. You'll have to still buy that separately, which is baffling, but it is what it is. I mean, we're talking about a game, in the case of Breath of the Wild, that goes back to the Wii U. It's going to have 3 generations of Nintendo hardware, the same game. But, okay, fine. Don't include the DLC, I guess. I guess I'm getting frustrated because I don't know why people are supporting stuff like this anymore. Like, they're just trying to screw you at this point. And people are still like, that's fine. I'll eat more feces. I'm for it.
Yeah, it's because it's okay. It's Nintendo.
Yeah. But yes, on that regard, sure. And then with Switch backwards compatibility, yes, you are right. It has mostly functionality. There's going to be some limitations. We got more information on that. Turns out it's a hybrid emulator. It partially works off of hardware and partially works off of software emulation. Nintendo actually elaborated on this on their website. So there's a good chunk of games that just outright don't work with their emulator. And then there's some where like they'll boot, but they're buggy. There's some that, boot and they're playable. Then there's some that work well. Then there's some that work great, etc. Basically, it's emulation. And the core lesson that we've learned from history on this, especially since the Switch 2 doesn't really seem to do much of anything to enhance Switch 1 games. It can only be detrimental to them, it seems. My advice to you would be keep your Switch 1 for Switch 1 games, and the Switch 2, think of it as a bonus feature that it plays Switch 1 games, but probably not the way you should actually do it. I would want to judge the Switch 2 solely on the merits of Switch 2 content, of which there is not a whole lot going on yet, which is fine. It is a launch console. I don't know, man. I'm just kind of looking at it like I see a lot of cracks in this thing that's really kind of bothering me. And I'm not saying it's going to fail, but if it does, it'd be pretty predictable to say why. So before we jump forward, do you have anything else you want to say on Switch 2?
Nothing much. As I told you, not super hyped for it, but we'll definitely want to get my hands on it. Not on launch date, maybe, but sooner or later. Given that there's one point though that I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but the Switch 1 is already filled with so many games. So you're like, do I need to buy the Switch 2 while I have a lot of options on Switch 1 to cover? So that's one thing you could think about. Or if you're, want to go with the hype train and just get a Switch 2 for the sake of it, you can do that as well. I'm also curious on whether it will and how long it'll take it to get a price drop, if any, because I don't think that
Switch
may
1
happen.
still never has. It's been out for 8
Yeah,
years.
yeah, but you might think maybe on the off chance, because of the complaints. But I don't know. There's nothing else that I can add actually, because it's
Alright.
still very, very new.
Okay, then we will move on to the next subject, which is kind of just a continuation of this, but Abdullah, thank you very much for that. So the next one up is by Sinjeet, who unfortunately did not get back to me, but I know he likes his alternate timeline story stuff, so we're just going to continue with this. What about a timeline where the Switch 2 fails? Because that's kind of my cheap way of throwing that in there. Alright, so let's talk about this. The thing with the Switch 2 is it's doing a lot of what... It's doing what a lot of consoles do when console companies kind of mess up. So, historically speaking, if a console is successful, like out of the gate, like the first time, the company is like excited they did it right, they're cool with it, they make a successor console, take a lot of what they did right and continue that trend. And usually the rule of 3 is that on the third one they do something really stupid. Now that rule isn't permanent, and there's obviously exceptions to it, but basically the bigger the hit one console is, the higher probability its follow-up is going to do something dumb. It happens a lot. The Wii U is a perfect example. Now, I loved the Wii U, but Nintendo's mentality going into that system was the Wii was perfect because it appealed to your grandmother and all these other people, so that's what we should do. We should just continue the Wii, but just minor upgrade. Sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? And like, I don't know, there's obviously differences, but, and I've seen a lot of people point this out, and I thought this was kind of a fascinating point. The Switch 2 is kind of the Steam Deck, but with Nintendo characters on it. And the Steam Deck, while good and respected by a lot of people who have it, it has not been the juggernaut success that like the Switch was. Like we used to have discussions, man, about like, will the Steam Deck come in and like knock out the Switch? It didn't even come close. It wasn't even like a realistic, like, I think I've only ever seen, outside of like conventions or just like friends who have one, like casually, the number of people I've ever seen like on a plane or something playing a Steam Deck, maybe like once ever, where I've seen the Switch that all the time. And that's fair. No sane person realistically thought that the Steam Deck would defeat the Switch. But I guess what I'm saying is like, I have concerns with this thing being successful when its target demographic is children, while simultaneously having all the problems of the Steam Deck. One of the things, the obvious thing about the Steam Deck that is a problem, always was and will always be with digital content, is you have to download stuff constantly. Now, a fully grown adult, accepts this because they're like, well, I'll plug it in, let it do its updates while I like prepare dinner or whatever you got to do. The whole point of pick up and play portable consoles is exactly that. Pick it up and play it. If everything on the Switch too, or not everything, but for the most part, requires you to be constantly updating stuff and downloading stuff, what 9-year-old has that kind of foresight and patience? You know what I mean? Like, I want to play this on the bus or whatever on the way to school. Oh, I forgot to download all the updates because I'm 9. I forgot to do that.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm not going to sit here and play it. Like, I don't know. It just feels like Nintendo's losing the script a bit here on, like, what made portables work. Much like they lost the script on the Wii U when the reason the Wii was a success was because of the mass appeal it had. Even though it sucked, it appealed to an entirely different demographic. And they did not understand that they were alienating the gamer base at their core. And they're kind of doing the same thing now. They're kind of alienating the core gamer base in various ways. Now, I don't think they're going as extreme with it, of course, as they did with the Wii U. But, like, I'm worried about it. Like, the overall reception to the Switch 2 that I've seen has not really been positive. Outside of the games themselves people seem to be on board with, but the hardware, not so much. And I don't know, man, like when you upset the core demographic that advertises and is passionate about this kind of thing, that's usually not a good sign. But the number one point I have seen, and I totally agree with, from that, let's say, ostracized group, is I think that Nintendo underestimates how many other ways we have to play games these days and how many games exist that we've never played, that if I don't have a Switch 2 right away, or maybe even ever, that I'm not exactly starving for entertainment. And I don't mean that personally. Like, obviously, I, too, have a ridiculous plethora of stuff I could play for the rest of my life and never finish. There's nothing on the Switch 2 that I absolutely must possess, at least at this time. But it seems like for once that isn't just my attitude. It seems like a lot of people are saying that. Now, we could be dead wrong. This thing could be a massive juggernaut success. That is very possible. It is Nintendo. Never count them out. But I don't know, man. If they do flop out, it won't really be that hard to see why. Anyway, that's my take. What do you think?
Very similar idea. Very similar kind of. I have a similar kind of thought process about it. That that's the way it may go. But at the same time, as you said, this is a Nintendo, so don't count them out. I mean, with PS1, PS2, that was a really huge success, right?
Yep.
So you never know what's gonna happen. And you mentioned the same thing that I said, that you have so many games that I'm not in a hurry for that, if ever. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And with the price point, I mean, let's be honest, not everybody is gonna look at it maybe the way you delved into it.
I don't know. We overanalyze it. I know. On the
Yeah.
surface, most people are just going to complain about the price. There's no reaching that. I'm not even trying to.
Yeah, because unfortunately that's what most people are gonna do. But
Yeah.
again, Nintendo, they have their history, they have their iconic franchises, and if they just limit the use, keep releasing things and they limit the use towards the Switch 1, keeping it more focused on Switch 2, it's probably gonna go, but maybe not as successful as the original Switch.
Well, I think there's almost no chance of that.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna. And I don't even think that people thought the Switch would be as successful as it was.
No. I admit I ate crow on that one. I didn't think the Switch 1 was going to work out too well for them. So I will admit that.
So yeah, you never know what's gonna happen. Probably within the first year, we're gonna start seeing the markers that are gonna guide us towards where this thing is heading.
Oh, yeah, within the first year. Hell, the first 6 months, because it's coming out in June. Like, we'll know by the end of the year, if, like, it's post, like, holiday season in December and all that. We'll know. Like, we'll know if this thing is dead in the water or not by that point.
Yeah, but because I also keep thinking of those who, you know, they're getting this for, they're not well educated when it comes to these to video games, but they want to get it for someone, and maybe it'll cause some sort of, I don't know, as when it comes to the price point, as you said, but at the same time, they may feel like this is some sort of upgrade. Oh, it's the same as a Switch. Yeah, it's the same as a Switch, but it's just like another version. So you can play this with that.
I'm going to interrupt you here because I think the point you're trying to make is there are going to be people who look at it like the way a lot of casuals looked at the Wii U, thinking it was just a tablet for the Wii.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I think
kind of like that, but
they might
not exactly.
Can't
describe. Yeah.
Dude, I don't know. You know, like, I think that's unfortunately why they called it Switch 2. Because it was like, hey, look, people are dumb. You know, they only understand sequelization. That's how people are going to get excited. If they came up with a new, like, you know, I don't even know, like some other total word, you know, doesn't matter because they didn't go with that. People might have been confused by it. They certainly learned not to put, like, Switch U or Switch It Up or something, like, punny. Like
or Switch
that.
Ultimate or something.
Yeah, they knew not to do that. Even though really what this is just the Switch Pro, but not really. Yeah, I take that back because it uses emulation for Switch 1 games. But I don't know, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, and with the whole backwards compatibility thing, it's gonna get very annoying because again, you'll be like, okay, so I have to get a Switch 1 to play this if you have a specific game in mind. This will be a very specific case by case thing. It won't really affect the overall trend. Yeah.
to be fair, most of the games that are outright not compatible usually are accessory based, like the Ring Fit and those like was the Labo ones that stuff like that. But there are straight up games that just don't work properly because again, this is not hardware. This is software. It's a large part of it is software emulation. It kind of works the way like a European launch PS3 did. So in North America and Japan, the launch PS3 had like a perfect hardware PS2 emulator inside because it was hardware. It was the Emotion Engine, all that stuff was built in there. In Europe, they decided not to do that for whatever reason, and it was like a mixture hybrid of emulation and hardware that didn't really work very well and ultimately was removed entirely anyway. And I'm sitting there going like, it is possible, everybody out there, that the launch versions of the Switch 2 will have Switch support, and then at some point they drop it. I doubt that. But, if they have to find a way to make this thing cheaper, because that very well could happen. Like, that happened with the PS3. They had to find a way to make it cheaper quickly because it was killing them. That would be one of the obvious places to cut. I don't know if they'll do that, but it's worth acknowledging. Because I think that having two competing price points in different countries, but referring to the Japan thing, even though there is a logical reason that is happening, I think that's going to be harder and harder for people to accept the notion that, wait a minute, obviously they can sell it for cheaper, they're just not doing it. Whereas it turns out, I've been reading a lot about this. This might be the first time Nintendo sells a console at a loss. Did you know that?
No, actually.
So Nintendo is pretty insistent on making money on the hardware. They're very old school minded in that. Sony was the one that introduced the whole idea of
software being the...
Yes, give away the razors to sell the blades. Nintendo has been opposed to that forever. This might be the first time they actually do it because it looks like the system actually, to get on a store shelf in the US or anywhere really, is about exactly what they're selling it for, if not even more. And so they're going to absolutely take a bath on it in Japan, but they're kind of willing to do that for their own society. But
not overall.
Yeah, not overall. And I think that people won't bother because people just don't look at those kinds of nuances. They just don't find that interesting enough. All they hear is, but it $150 cheaper over there. And that's all they care about.
Surface level again. That's
exactly. It's just surface level intellect. So it's like, okay, I understand everybody out there. Money is expensive. Life is expensive. It is hard to make money and get stuff done. But, the childish notion that they're only doing it because they're greedy or whatever, that shows you've never taken a class on economics. You need to study how this stuff actually works. Follow the money. I've been saying this forever. If you follow how money works, you will understand how our entire planet functions. It's never that surface level. It's never that cartoonishly like simple. That it's just, they greedy, I poor. That's not how it works.
Not black and white at all.
Exactly.
There's a lot of gray area.
Everything is super nuanced. So we're kind of deviating from the point, but the idea is, what if the system fails? And so it very well could. I personally don't think it will, which means it probably will. But but if it does, what's the future of Nintendo? Well, I think they'll be fine. I think that they'll end up retooling. They'll probably pump at least 4 years into this thing like they did with the Wii U. Again, under the proviso that the thing actually outright flops. I think they would obviously salvage it kind of like PS3 style. And then once they get past it, they'd learn those lessons and go into whatever the successor is after that. It really depends on like what generates any revenue and what shows them their interest. Although I will go so far as to say this may very well be the last physical media platform of any kind. I do not think that the Xbox brand will release another physical media iteration. They currently do not have one. They do not even make a version of the Xbox Series X now that has a disk drive anymore. Sony is kind of up in the air. They clearly want to get rid of it with the PS5 Pro. Didn't have a disk drive. Oh yeah, there's a side option. You can do that. But like clearly they're trying to wean you off of this to lock you further into their ecosystems.
Yeah, and now this is the eventual death of
precisely. And now even Nintendo is doing it where they're like, yeah, technically the option's there, but really we would prefer if you didn't do that. This might be the last gasp of physical media. And it's just kind of a sad way to go. But we don't know yet, but just, I'm saying that now because we live in that period where it hasn't quite come out yet. and it might very well be the last time we get to experience that. But I don't know. Sony might surprise us, but who knows? Anyway.
Yeah, I guess we have only time will tell.
Go ahead. Tell me what you think.
I think it's not gonna be as successful as the Switch 1. That's what we discussed earlier. And in terms of physical media, yeah, I believe that this could mark the end of it. It's very difficult to see that it's gonna survive another generation. Maybe it will. Who knows? There's also one point that I just thought about here. It's very interesting to see that whether it succeeds or fails, how long will Switch 1 be in production?
Oh, I give Switch 1 at least another, 2 years.
Yeah, so I was thinking the same thing. Even if it fails, pretty much they're gonna go for at least around the time they gave it for the Wii U. And Nintendo, I think, has enough money to recover from the loss of a console. I'm guessing they have enough to survive if this doesn't work out. But I will not be able to predict their next move if this doesn't work out. They pretty much have to re-innovate something new. Re-innovate and create something new again. I don't know, but time will tell. The first 6 months will pretty much show us or give us an idea of where this is heading. But I personally don't see it. I don't know. This could be coming from the fact that I got older, but I also don't see it being as successful as Switch 1.
Oh, dude, it's not going to beat the Switch 1. The Switch 1 could end up being the highest selling console of all time.
If it goes for the next 2 to 3 years, if it stays in production, I'm pretty sure it'll surpass. I think it's very close to the PS2.
It actually could very well do it this year. It's not impossible. It would really just be a matter of how much Nintendo cares to try and beat that goal.
It's reached above 150, right? So.
Yeah, it would have. Obviously, 155 would have been more doable till Sony moved the goalpost and said, actually, it was 160. Fine.
Yeah, and tomorrow it's going to be 165.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, we found another 10 million units we sold. Sorry. Anyway,
so I guess that's it, yeah.
Yeah. All right, well then, I think that's enough of this for now. I'm going to give a round of shout-outs, if you're cool with that, Abdullah. You got anything else you want to add before we go?
Nope, I'm all good.
All right, then a round of shout-outs here. All the following people are Patreon backers, and they are at the tier in which they get a shout-out, so huge thank you to you guys. We got Jeb Malcolm, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, and Trey Wagner. Once again, that is Jeb Malcolm, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, and Trey Wagner. Also, I should have said again, Sinjeet gave us the previous subject, even though he didn't respond, but I'm going to give him credit all the same. Abdullah, thank you as always for joining me, and I will catch you next time. And we are back. We have returning champion Joseph. Welcome back, dude.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me back here.
Thanks, as always, for participating. Now, so this might be a little unconventional, because Joseph, of course, you being a Patreon backer, you get to pick a subject. Now, you sort of picked this, / I think we both just kind of agreed this was obvious. What did you want to talk about again? Could you just, maybe enlighten me a little bit?
Well, there's a certain little thing that happened on the 2nd, and it's called that Croc Legend of the Gobos remaster, which was released. No, of course, I'm talking about the Switch 2.
Yeah, well, I mean, expectations there. Yeah, no, let me, before you go into that, let me just say, okay, obviously Abdullah and I just spent an hour talking about Switch 2. I've also got a video out on my condensed thoughts on it. So what we kind of decided to do here is basically give you Joseph's take on it. He has seen my video, so if he has anything he wants to add based on what I said as reactionary, or ask me any questions, etc., we'll do that. But I promise that this won't be just me being like, what I have a problem with is those game cards. I'm not going to do that again. There's no reason to. So, I'll just let Joseph kind of take point here. Go for it, man.
Okay, so obviously we'll get the obvious thing out of the way. Hooray, Switch 2, it exists. We've seen it. It's a better Switch, which is basically what 95% of people wanted out of a Switch 2, including me, so I'm happy about that. Nintendo did the thing where they didn't tell us the pricing, and then we found it out later, and everyone was like, what? And all that nice fun stuff, but $450 is around what we could have reasonably expected for this. And
yeah, even though people don't seem to want to believe that, but yeah.
Right. I mean, obviously, like, people who've been following gaming trends and, like, tech trends and realizing the whole thing where they were like, Moore's Law is dead meant, knew that if you wanted a more powerful Switch, it was going to cost money. Also, there's the sheer fact that Nintendo took 8 years to bring this out. I don't think it took them 8 years to research and develop the specs that they wanted. It probably just took them that long to be like, okay, we could do this, and we could do it at a somewhat reasonable price point. Or they could have been like, okay, we can't get this any lower. We have to get something out the door. Type deal.
Yeah, that, and there was no incentive to sell it anytime sooner. I mean, people can complain all they want about the Switch 1 being underpowered, and I hate that we now have to call it that. But the fact is, 8 years. Now the second highest selling video game platform of all time, and still has never had a price drop. Technically, they didn't even have to do this now. They're just doing it because I think it was getting to a point where developers are like, we can't really make games for you anymore. It's just too old of tech.
Yeah, it's basically really at the point where Nintendo is like, okay, not even we can wring out more power out of this thing now. We need the new one. Is basically what happened. Which, I mean, most people buy a Nintendo system for Nintendo games, so that's not necessarily a bad thing. Though,
you know what dawned on me today,
and
it's kind of depressing. So I'm 38, which I don't have a problem with that part. But Nintendo put the Wii out 19 years ago.
Yep.
So for basically half of my life, Nintendo has not tried to make competitive hardware. In fact, it's getting to a point where the majority of my lifetime, Nintendo has not been a console manufacturer that cares about having like upper echelon technology in their system. Like that's right around the corner for me personally. Like, depends on your age, who you are out there.
I'm at most a year younger than you, so I mean.
But there you go. That means, so maybe even the majority of your lifetime.
Yeah. Which
the
it
older
doesn't
you
necessarily feel like that for me because, I mean, I had an SNES and like played my grandma's Super Nintendo. I didn't actually own... Well, no, I owned an NES, but like other than the NES, like I didn't regularly start owning Nintendo hardware that wasn't a handheld, the Game Boy, until the GameCube. So it's like GameCube came out and then the Wii happened. It's like, okay, that makes sense. I mean, Sony and Microsoft have all of the money. So
we're reaching a point like where Gen Z in particular, when they were little kids, is when the Wii came out. And so they don't even really know an era of Nintendo where Nintendo tried to make competitive hardware.
Yeah, and even
at least not, without looking at it retroactively.
Yeah, and like even my baby sister, like she, like, because I had stuff like she's Gen Z. But like when she was 3 years old, she played my GameCube all the time because it was a video game system. Her brother was playing it and she loved it. And she's as nerdy as I am, but like she wouldn't have thought of anything. Like Nintendo, it's like, oh, Nintendo's trying to be the best system there is with the most powerful thing. Yeah, she was like 3 to 6. She didn't care.
Yeah, I'm not saying they have to care. It's just kind of an interesting observation to reach that kind of point for me personally.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, because like when I'm old enough that like I remember, of course, the Sega does what Nintendo 90s campaigns about Nintendo has more powerful hardware except for blast processing, blah 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 blah, like all that sort of stuff. And to think that era has effectively been over for like half of my life is a little weird. It's like when it dawned on me, I think it was back in 2010 or 2011, I think is when Sonic had been on third-party hardware more than he had been on first-party hardware. Like that, like Sega only made consoles effectively for like 12, 13 years, and it's been far more than that since they pulled out.
Dang, I never even like thought of that. Yeah, you're right.
It's depressing, isn't it?
A bit.
Yeah, so like it's the same with that kind of thing. Anyway, sorry to depress everybody, but this is supposed to be about Joseph's take on the Switch too.
Yeah, so like basically, like my take is honestly like when seeing it was a lot similar to yours, physical firmware update type deal. yay, that's cool. I looked at, like, when I was watching it, and I saw them, like, actually demonstrating the mouse control, so it's like, okay, so that's actually real. So then immediately they brought up, they showed Civ 7, it was like, yeah, Civ 7 with Functional Controls Edition. Cool.
Holy crap, you can play the game edition.
Yeah, which honestly, like, I don't know how badly that game runs on the Switch 1, but I can't imagine it runs all that great. I mean, I've messed around with it on the Steam Deck a bit. Like, they have a controller option. It's functional, but now people can, like, actually play Civ on their Switch 2. You know, like, you're playing Civ on the PC, which is neat. I'm surprised they didn't show, like, a Mario Paint or anything. It was actually...
You know what? You are totally right about that, because, like, when I was watching that live, I was chatting with a bunch of the guys in my Discord, my regulars, which you're in my Discord and you almost never talk, you slut. But anyway, so we were talking about this.
It's hard to...
Wow, I see how it is. Okay. Anyway, so as we were all talking about this, there was like one thing where they had the mouse, as you're talking about, like going around. It looked like they were coloring stuff. And a lot of people were going, oh, it's Mario Paint. Mario Paint's coming back. While I agree it was not that, and that would have been an interesting tech demo effectively to use, I always thought it was such a good opportunity. Like, where is Nintendo on a game called Mario Paintball? Like, imagine Splatoon, but with Mario characters. Where is that?
I don't know. Like, that
seems so obvious, doesn't it? The name alone is like why you make that game.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
seriously. Like, I definitely saw YouTube videos, like, around the time where, well, no, even, like, pre-Splatoon, where that something like that was mentioned. It's like, hey, do you want people to you want, like, your main demographic to actually care about first-person shooters? And then it just, like, did a graphic of Mario. I think it was Movie Bob with the Game Over finger. Actually, it was, like, he just, like, showed, like, a doctored image of Mario, like, as like a paintball game, and like called Mario with a Mario paintball logo. It's like, there you go, easy answer. So
yeah, that doesn't exist. Absolutely would work.
Yeah.
I can totally envision Mario paintball. It's just so easy. But maybe that's why they haven't done it. I don't know. But anyway, that was just a random thought, since that isn't actually any official Nintendo Switch 2 thing or news or whatever. Anyway, sorry, go on.
Another thing I've really liked seeing, which, I mean, granted, doesn't usually affect me all that much, because I do have Nintendo Switch Online, but I don't have the expansion pass. But the GameCube games are coming to the expansion pass.
Like I forgot to mention that. I forgot about that.
Which, I was like, oh, cool. And then the first thing they show is Wind Waker, and I was like, well, I guess we're not getting Wind Waker HD on Switch 2.
Yeah, that would be truth. You're right, I did mention that in my video. I forgot about that in the podcast part. Yeah, the GameCube Online service, which is funny because I actually kind of predicted that like 2 years ago. I said that would be like
everyone's been like, GameCube win.
Yeah.
Win GameCube.
It seemed like obvious. I mean, granted, yeah, it wasn't a hard prediction to make, but like, you know, it is funny. Like, they finally woke up to that, which is good. Maybe all along it was more of a technical limitation than we realized for whatever reason. Yeah, well, I don't pretend to know what that would be. But.
Like, I'm sure, like, the Switch is definitely powerful, should be powerful enough to emulate GameCube hardware, but it might not have been powerful enough to emulate it well enough that Nintendo was comfortable charging for it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Because, I mean, effectively, it can run Wii U content. The Wii U can run GameCube content. But it could just be that the architecture was different enough, the true emulation of it was not stable. Like, I mean, we don't know. The truth is we don't know.
Yeah.
Or it was a simple marketing decision that they're like, GameCube has a lot of nostalgia, so we're going to throw this at the nerds when we launch this thing. It could have just been that simple.
It could have been that, too. Really, I mean, whatever. The point is, you'll be able to play the GameCube version of Wind Waker on your Switch 2. You'll be able to. I think there were a couple other games mentioned, one of which like is F-Zero GX, I think.
Yeah, F-Zero was one of them. Actually, I'm going to say something a little sadistic here about this GameCube update. I'm actually really happy about it, but not for the normal reason. The normal reason would be like, oh, cool, now I can play all these, like, I can download these GameCube games, play them on the Switch 2, whatever. I actually don't care about that. But it'll make those games a lot more accessible to people
That's actually why I was excited about it.
Yes, and it will likely drive down the prices of the actual physical editions, which will work very well, nicely with the conjunction of the demographic collapse of millennials trying to sell that stuff off anyway. So like, me who wants to get more physical GameCube games and finish that up, oh good, that's going to get a little easier.
Yeah, like when I was seeing it, I was like looking at the list of like the future games to come. I was like, okay, so it turns out that other than F-Zero GX, I think I actually have all of these, but I'm just glad that people won't have to pay like anywhere from like $90 to like $200 to play these games anymore. Like they could get Nintendo Switch expansion pass for like a month and then play them, and then if they're smart and cancel it like when they're done.
Yeah. Although, to be fair, that's just the initial lineup. Like, we don't know. They could support that for years, adding...
there were, like, 3 games that we know are coming at launch, and then there was a list of other stuff. Like, Path of Radiance is on there. The GameCube Pokemon games are on there, like Coliseum and XD. Let's see, there was...
I'm actually happy about those, not because I care about Pokemon, because spoilers, I don't. But... I don't own the physical editions for GameCube, and I don't want to because they cost a ridiculous amount of money for something that to me is not anything I'm interested in. Yeah, so you get it. But like, I want them as physical editions just for the purposes of having a GameCube set, but justifying paying for them is terrible. But again, if they're more digitally accessible to Nintendo collectors and fans that really are only holding on to them because that's the only way to play them legitimately, that'll help guys like me out, because those guys will probably purge them. Yeah. Ironically, the only physical Pokemon GameCube game I own is Pokemon Box. Isn't that messed up? Like, I actually have that.
You lucky bastard.
Yeah, thank you. I actually bought that as I got bullied into buying that at a convention back in 2015. I was at Mo GameCon 1. And one of the guys was selling it for like $300, and I was like, "That's ridiculous. Who wants that?" And all the con heads are like, "You should get it. You should get it. You should support this guy. Like, you're our only guest. You should get this. This is really cool. It's gonna be worth a lot more one day." I was like, I don't know why I listened to them, but I'm glad I did, because now it's like what, like a $3,000. Like, I have the cardboard box and everything.
Wow. Okay. I am going to take back the lucky bastard comment, because like, by 2015, it was, I mean, obviously it exploded in price, but at that point it was either you buy this now because you know it's going to go up, or you paid like a ridiculous amount of money for what Pokemon Box is.
You can still call me that. I'm fine with it.
Okay. But yeah, like for whatever reason, I would have figured that if you somehow had Pokemon Box, you got it somehow, like back when it was like actually like MSRP or something, because I can't imagine getting it.
The problem with that particular release, I'm sure you know the history of it, is just that it was a Nintendo New York exclusive. So, like, that was the only way to get it. As a result, it's crazy rare. So I don't
about that part.
Yeah.
I just know
this is not about
money.
Yeah, that one will probably not be released over there.
Oh,
but who knows?
Yeah, no, that's not going to be on Switch 2 because it's completely useless unless it's like on the Game Boy Advance games, the Pokemon games go to there and are somehow compatible with it.
Yeah.
Which I don't think they're going to do.
Yeah, I doubt it too.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get back on to Switch 2.
Right.
Like, what else you got?
Well, hey, if anything, us getting distracted makes this more interesting instead of going over the same stuff over and over again.
I mean, to be fair, we've been doing pretty well.
True.
So, yeah.
Okay.
All right, then you want to talk about like hypothetical features or something like that?
Hypothetical features.
So I've seen people kicking around the idea that, and this is completely made up. Everybody, completely made up. I am not saying this feature exists. What if you had some sort of connectivity between the Switch 1 and Switch 2, where if you had the Switch 2 docked and you were playing it, you could link it with a Switch 1 like a controller, so you could have dual screen support?
That would be neat and would be very useful for all those Wii U ports that already exist, and they're not going to.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
You see, and essentially you would just use the Switch as a screen, and the console's doing the. I mean, I don't really know. I'm not saying that's even technically possible, or if, but then again, Nintendo made it very clear to us in that whole like digital game card thing, as well as just the idea of, some of the materials. Cards. Yeah, yes. They seem to expect, and at least to their credit, understand that a lot of people own more than one Switch. And so if I were them, I would want to set up some sort of incentive program to do that, other than just people are lazy and they want to have them in 2 different rooms. Like, again, that feature I just described to you, imagine that being exclusive to the idea that you have 2 of these things. Because then you can dock one, link it with the other, have dual screen support, and then that allows them, as you said, to liberate the Wii U titles that haven't, gone over there yet, if they want to do that. But also it can give you access to 3DS compatibility, DS compatibility, and just anything new that they feel like doing with that.
That would be neat.
I don't know. I'm just floating it.
It's definitely something I don't think is going to happen, unfortunately. But
I agree. I agree, but I'm not asking that.
Right,
I'm asking what you think of it as a core concept.
Oh, no, it's amazing. I want it. It's not happening, but I want it.
Perfect.
But, I mean, at this point, like, so many Wii U games have come to the Switch already that there's not really much of an incentive for them to actually do that, is the thing.
If you confine it to the Wii U ports, yes, absolutely. But I'm saying it opens you up to DS, 3DS resales. It opens you up to just creative new outputs. So they can make new games that support that.
True.
Etc. And obviously, yes, as we said, the Wii U then becomes an option. But or any of these definitive editions, because they're clearly going to resell Switch titles with these enhanced editions. Like Breath of the Wild is a perfect example. I don't know if there were any Breath of the Wild exclusive Wii U features that took advantage of the gamepad. I genuinely don't know.
There were not.
Okay, but for the most part, those conversions over to the Switch didn't drop anything. The only one I can think of, and this is a dumb example, is Mario Kart 8. On the Wii U version, because you had the gamepad, you could actually use the Wii U as like a honk, like you could honk with the horn with it. Whereas I guess the Switch version you can't do that because it's missing. But dumb stuff like that could be added. But then you could actually build proper games around it if you want to. Yeah. But I'm not saying this has to exist because of the Wii U. I must stress that the real benefit of that is for Nintendo seems to have finally figured out the value of selling you nostalgia. It took them forever, but they seem to have finally figured that out. The Switch Online shop is obviously missing DS and 3DS content. That would open that door. It would be there. You could sell, and hell, they could put Wii U versions of games up there if they really wanted to. It would be an option. And I think Nintendo likes money for games they don't really have to do anything with.
They do like money. They do like not spending.
DS is the low-hanging fruit because it would be vastly easier to emulate. It's much smaller, so
downloading titles would not be a big deal.
Exactly. It would be vastly easier to do. 3DS would probably come with some sort of limitations depending on the 3D compatibility of any given game, but I wouldn't expect them to bulk be like, here's all the 3DS games. They'd obviously cherry pick a library. Yeah. And the Wii U would have the same thing. But I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there as a potential idea.
I mean, that definitely would be neat. I'm going to be so sad that that's not going to likely ever happen.
It's not happening, but it would be cool. All right, let's focus on things that are happening. What else you got on Switch 2?
So one funny thing is when they were demonstrating like their whole game share thing, I was like, oh, cool. The DS and 3DS features back. So that was neat.
We're bringing it back to that already.
Yeah. So so that was a thing that existed and had download play options on the DS and 3DS. So it's nice to see them back. Apparently making it so that if you have one copy of the game and you're playing with people locally, you could all just play and not need to, have multiple people for the same game if you're playing in handheld mode, which is neat. But yeah, I mean, basically my whole thought process with it, before I found out the price was, yeah, I'm definitely getting one of these at some point. For sure. I'll try to get one as soon as I can, actually. Then I saw the price and then found out the price of some of the games, and it's I'm still gonna maybe try to get one, but if I don't get one, I'm not gonna be too worried about it, because I don't know how much you talked about the pricing with
We did pretty extensively.
Okay, but okay, so just to bring it up again a little bit, Mario Kart World, $80. You're jumping straight from 60 to 80 for some games, and it's like even me, like I'm like, I mean, I bought like the full edition of like Civ 7 like on launch for $120, and I was perfectly satisfied with that. I look at Mario Kart and it's like, yeah, this is an open world Mario Kart. I don't know if I'm going to get $80 worth of playing it out of it, because based on like how relatively little I played Mario Kart 8. So it's like, that's one thing to consider.
Yeah,
like
that's completely fair.
Yeah. So I'm just like, huh. But
well, I know you guys who are listening, I'm not going to go into this whole thing again, because obviously Abdullah and I talked about this for like 10 minutes. But just to Joseph, because you didn't have the benefit of hearing this yet. Basically, all I really elaborated on was the buying power of the dollar now,
right, you mentioned
as
that
opposed
in
to
the
what
video.
it was. Yeah, as well as the concept of inflation. So my opinion on that hasn't really changed. Mostly, I think it's more of a psychological problem that people are like, they just don't want to hear that a video game costs $80.
Oh yeah,
nobody
like,
does. I don't want
like I said,
that, you know?
I'm like as far as like $80 goes, like yeah, I can do it. It's just I'm like looking at it again. I was like, am I really going to get? Am I going to get my $80?
Let me explain this. I agree with you, and let me explain this a slightly different way. I'm sure, Joseph, you know, but I present this question to the audience. Do you know why things cost X $9.99? So like $69.99 instead of $70.
Partially sales tax, partially to
it's not sales tax.
Trick people into thinking it's cheaper.
It's psychological. Mm-hmm. The human brain likes to process the first number in the sequence, and when you see $69.99, it is easier to believe that that number is closer to 6 or 60 than it is to 70. It is the same type of thing. Basically, nobody wants to hear that a game costs $80. They just don't want to hear that, because we've been trained for so long to hear a number that is lower, 60, and say that's what it's supposed to cost, even though it does not cater to certain economic realities, inflation, buying power, etc. It just sucks. Like, I'm not defending this. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like, hell yeah, $80 games. Like, I hate it. But, like, yeah, I just get it. I understand why it has to be that way. But yes, it sucks. However, to your point, I too sat there when I found out the price later, and I was like, huh, I don't know if I really want this right away. Like, I'll be totally blunt about this. $450 console, $80 game, maybe $90 game in some cases, $70. It's going to fluctuate depending on the game. And I'm sitting there like, that's a pretty tall order for something I'm at best mildly interested in, because it has a few games I absolutely want. Like, I want to play Mario Kart World. I want to play the new Donkey Kong, etc.
Yeah.
Do I want to play them enough that I care to get this thing right away? Because I essentially don't consider Switch 1 support a seller, because I have a Switch 1, and we know that this thing won't do it as well. So that it might as well just not be backwards compatible. All right? That's how I'm going to look at it. So I'm sitting there going, what value is this to me? And sadly, the number one reason I have to get it is so that I can make videos about it for you guys, not because I actually want it. And that's not good.
That's not good.
Like, I've run into that problem in the past, and I understand that's usually my fault, because I want things like, you know, the Apple Pippin or whatever. Like, obviously,
that's completely
the value
different.
of that.
You're
a
game collecting channel. Like,
sure, correct.
That's
correct.
old stuff. Like,
correct. But the point is, I would get that stuff partially because I enjoy the bizarre nature of it, but also because I want to be able to make content on it. No one is going to sit down and have Apple Pippin night. Although, hilariously, we actually did that last week. A bunch of the people from my Discord came into Chicago, and for MGC in Milwaukee, we all got together. One of our buddies, shout out to the Snowman. We all went to his house. We set up the American Apple Pippin. He not only has one, he has 2 American Apple Pippins. And we sat down and we played Apple Pippin games. We played the Home Improvement game. What up? That is a real thing.
Wow.
Sorry, Home Depot game. Home Depot, not Home Improvement, not the Super Nintendo Home. Home Depot, the store. More bizarre. It's very bizarre. It just helps you like figure out how to buy items at their store. It's ridiculous. But we sat there, we played that along with some other garbage. But you only do that in a specific context. So, but at least with the Apple Pippin, not only do I get a video out of it, I'm excited to make content out of it, I actually appreciate the story, its history, the bizarre nature of it. It gets me excited to talk about it. The Switch 2, to me, is a physical firmware update. It feels like the Xbox Series X. I'm just going to unplug one, plug this in. Oh, good, the hardware's a little better. Yippity dippity skippity doodah. I'm not that excited about its story. What's its story? Its story is, well, Nintendo could have released this 10 years ago, but it was more cost effective to do it now. Sweet. What a good background. That's awesome. Oh, and the games, for the most part, are not physically contained within the carts. It's there mostly as a novelty to trick people like me. So it's not really made for guys like me. It gives the illusion that it is. So I'm not really that excited about it for anything other than the actual game content, of which, admittedly, there are some titles that intrigue me. Again, Mario Kart World, I think I will genuinely have a blast playing that. But is that enough for me to justify that price tag? At the moment, I'm leaning towards no. Which is not... It makes me a little depressed, honestly. Because, again, I own a Casio PV1000. But I was more excited to own that and make a video about it, which I haven't done yet, admittedly. And make a video and all that sort of stuff and talk about the ridiculous nature of that console than I am to own this. Does that mean Switch 2 is worse? Absolutely not. It is objective. It's not even released. No. It's already a better console than that thing. That's not even debatable. But one got me excited for one reason or another. And so I have to look at it and be like, here's the situation with Switch 2's pricing. If the system is a success, its price will stay exactly the same for its entire run. We are in year 8 of the original Switch. It has never had a price drop, ever. The best they ever gave us was a couple bundle editions that threw a game in left and right. That's about it, which is ridiculous. However, if the system fails, then you are on more of a Wii U situation, or even to a lesser extent the 3DS situation, where it came out and was failing until they did a price drop. That's the only context in which you get a price drop out of Nintendo, is if the system isn't working. But if the system isn't working, then you only have two options. Either they salvage it like they did with the 3DS, and I'm glad they did, or they really can never turn it around like the Wii U, where I loved that system, but it was short-lived and had a 200-game library before they just abandoned it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, like I was there. I remember how I got a Wii U like when Smash came out. Like I knew it was like a failing console and I would only be in the Nintendo thing, but I was like, you know what?
Yeah, sure.
I'll get it. It's a Nintendo system. I'll have fun with it, with the Nintendo games at least. I have a PS. I think I had it. No, I didn't have a PS4 at that time. I got the PS4 later. So yeah, but I mean, I totally get you, and like Nintendo did the turnaround like super fast because they had to, but they at least lasted as long as they reasonably could have been expected to, without, you know, making everyone think they were pulling a Sega and then destroying their business. But
precisely. I don't know. So this is more of a personal decision journey between myself. But it turns out in the US anyway, pre-orders are likely not going to start. I think we learned this today at the time of recording, until like May 8th. So I got some time to figure that one out. I think, knowing me, like realistically at the end of the day, I will probably try to get one. All I guess I'm trying to say is I'm not excited about it. And I wish I was. I was while watching their Direct. It was everything after that made me not like it. And a lot of people were pointing out, like, the other thing about Doug Bowser was talking about, oh, if the system's too expensive for you. Like, this has been misquoted to hell. But basically the sentiment was, if the Switch 2 is too expensive for you, don't forget, we'll still have the Switch 1 available. Which gave everybody Don Matrick vibes of when he said, oh, if you don't like the Xbox One, we have an old thing called the Xbox 360. Which is just, like, not getting your core audience. Now, I don't think Doug Bowser meant it that way, but unfortunately that's... Everybody's upset, so they had to blame somebody.
Right.
But, I don't know, man. I don't know. It depends on how readily available it is. You know, with... One thing we've learned in Nintendo history, if the system's readily available, like, immediately, it's not doing well. That's typically how it works with them. If you can't get a pre-order, or you can't walk into a store and get it, like, immediately, then it's probably a success story. And if you can, then it's the Wii U. But whatever. Do you have anything else to say on Switch 2? I'm sorry, I kind of...
I probably do have a bunch to say on it, but I mean, when you mentioned that you like weren't like super... I mean, you were excited about it until you like saw like all the stuff afterwards. Like, I was kind of like... So, like, I was basically like, yeah, okay, physical firmware update, cool, this is neat. I'm glad that we actually know what this stuff looks like, but I wasn't like super excited, like, oh, I definitely need this, even before everything else came out. And I think it's partially because, I mean, the Switch already did the hybrid console thing, so it's like, that's not new. And the Steam Deck exists now, too, and like all the other like portable gaming PCs, like powerful hardware that you can take travel with handheld wise, play a game, and I go back home onto your like main setup and keep playing the same game, is not a new concept anymore. So Nintendo basically only, since they're not doing anything absurd with it, they basically only have the games to go off of this time around. Exactly.
So that's what I was saying before. The only thing that is there for me is the specific titles. And as of now, the only one where I would like, oh, I know I'm going to put sync hours into that, would be Mario Kart World. I think I would very much enjoy Donkey Kong and Metroid Prime 4, etc. But those would not be the extensive amount of time I'd put in Mario Kart World. Is Mario Kart World worth that to me? Like, am I willing to pay, like, nearly... I guess it'd be like around $550 because I'm not going to do that digital bundle version for $500.
Yeah,
am I willing to pay that for essentially one game?
I will be doing that bundle if I bother to get Mario Kart.
But you like digital, I do not. So, but then again, that's the point. I don't really have that choice, do I?
Yeah. In that case, it's just the case of like console is like with console, I do like to go physical if I can, but with that big of a price difference for a game that I know I'm not. For a game that I'm not sure I'm going to sink enough hours into to justify paying $80 for, like I'd have to go. If I get the bundle, yeah, I'll have Mario Kart and I'll play it. If I can't get that and I can only get the base console, I'm not getting Mario Kart probably. Or
I completely understand that because of that exact line you just said. That particular game doesn't mean much to you. That game, however, is the only thing that is even keeping me in the conversation.
True.
Me personally. Now. That will change. These are the launch titles. But the question is, do I care enough to deal with it right away? And at the moment, I got to go with a no. We'll see if that changes. You know, I'm not saying they're going to surprise us with some other crazy title in there before the launch, of course. But I don't know, man. I'm just going to have to kind of figure that one out for myself. But I will tell you this. That element of physical media, is gimped as it is the only reason this is even a debate for me. Right. Because if that wasn't there, if this was purely digital, I'd be talking about it just to tell you I'm not getting it.
Right.
Like that would be the end. I will boldly tell everybody listening to this right now, when the next Xbox inevitably comes out and has no disk drive or physical media apparatus, I'm not getting it. The same would apply to the PlayStation. The same would apply to whatever Nintendo successor is. It is a requirement for me. Their sole potential exception to that would be if for some reason PS6 was a digital-only system and for some reason Shenmue 4 ended up on it. I would get that for that game, and the physical edition of Shenmue 4 would be my PS6. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Yeah. But like beyond that, the game and the console would be dead to me. And that's just the point I've reached in my life. I'm nearly 40. It is what it is. I have enough games that I can play for the rest of my life, and I will never have played them all. Like, it's just how it is. I don't need new content to feel like I care about modern stuff anymore. I just don't need that. So that's what the point I'm trying to make here is the games are the only thing that make the Switch 2 interesting to me. And as of now, there's only one on it where I'm like, okay, I'm still in the discussion. If Mario Kart World wasn't there, or if it didn't look intriguing, I would have ended this conversation an hour ago. You know what I mean? Like, we wouldn't have had much else to say. Yeah. So, anyway. Sorry. Anything else you want to say on Switch 2?
I know you probably talked about this for a bit, but
go for it.
the fucking game key card thing, like the fact that that's like an official thing that's like Nintendo just like has on their website and explains it, I'm partially like in two minds about it. On the first mind, it's like, oh cool, you have an official thing about it, so people will stop putting download codes in fucking Switch boxes, because some of them apparently did that, which is just absurd. But on the other hand, it's like, okay, so you've created a digital content thing that has the disadvantages of a physical console. Cool, good job.
Feel free to elaborate.
Like, because basically, like you have your license key, which is the game card. You put it in there. You still have to download the entire game, and then you have it. And then you take the card out, you can't play it. So you basically have a digital only. You're going to basically have digital only games that you could lose like a physical cartridge. And I mean, has it been confirmed that you can actually sell those game key cards and like sell a license?
Yes, you can. However, I believe they just get wiped out. You have to re-download them or whatever. So like, I don't know what the technical method by which that works is, but yes, you are allowed to resell them apparently.
Okay, so basically it just means that they're not going to look at it like a code on it and be like, oh, this has been used already, it's attached to this account.
No, I believe its functionality is tied to your console until you wipe it or something, but again, we don't really know that. But yes,
you do have to actually physically wipe it first. Okay, that's going to be an issue. Because so many people are going to forget to do that.
Yeah, I am sure. And have fun GameStop employees having to figure that one out every time.
Mm-hmm. Also,
anyway,
have fun, future Switch 2 collectors in like 10 years when the console's not, or like I guess maybe more like 20 years when the console's not, servers aren't active anymore. Because who knows, like, and I really hope that these game key cards, like games that are on the game key cards, are only on the game key cards and not also like actual physical editions spread out between them. Just because it would be because otherwise it would be too confusing otherwise.
There's no way to know. Some of the releases seem like they're going to operate on both, depending on like which edition you get. But again, we don't know. This is purely speculation on this stuff at this point. None of us have access to it. But again, this is like, we did talk about it for a while, but this is just kind of depressing. But it is it's the state of physical media, and it's just kind of where we all allowed ourselves to go since the last time there was a collective effort to resist this type of thing in any meaningful way was basically the Xbox One 2013 DRM debacle. And since then, we've just gradually accepted the stripping away of ownership rights. And this is the culmination of it. This is like the last gasp of physical media, and it's not a good gasp. So it is what it is. But I think that's actually a pretty good transition into our next
I was about to just say, yep, let's go talk about the next thing now.
Yeah. So we'll stop there. So Joseph, thank you very much for that subject. And our last one comes from Spencer Purrier, who never got back to me, so we're picking this subject on his behalf. But leading right into it. Basically, you guys, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this, but I kind of wanted to talk about it because there was a little bit of an update recently. Ubisoft is dealing with a lawsuit in the American state of California over the game The Crew, which was a game that I believe came out like 12 years ago. I don't remember. I think it was a very early like Xbox One, PS4 title, so maybe it was like 10 years ago. I don't know. But basically what the lawsuit stipulates is that when Ubisoft made the game, you bought it with the expectation that the game was in fact yours, just as any one of us does typically when we buy a game. Now, you could buy the physical edition of the game, you could buy the digital edition of the game, it didn't matter, it worked. However, it connected to a server for the game to function. Ubisoft, a few years ago, I think it was a few years ago, decided to shut down said server. So no matter what iteration of that game you had, the game no longer functions. So in California, there is a lawsuit filed basically saying like this is effectively theft. And they tried to attach some other California statutes in there, saying particularly things like California has a gift card law that says within the boundaries of California, a gift card is not allowed to ever expire. And they're saying that this is a violation of that. Ubisoft is making the argument that, like, you know, games aren't really meant to exist in perpetuity. And from a financial perspective, I understand what they're saying. Like, The Crew is probably a game that very few people log into and play anymore. But Ubisoft still had to pay to keep servers online, etc., etc. But I obviously am of the mentality that, games are property. Like, I don't own the rights to the crew, but if I bought the game, if I bought a copy of the game, it is my right to play it in perpetuity. Except you have forced me to not have access to it anymore due to your actions digitally outside of my control. So this is where this lawsuit is significant, not just because who cares about the specific state of this game or Ubisoft in general. This lawsuit, depending on where it falls, could ultimately define the very concept of digital rights. Because if the judge takes Ubisoft's side on this, it opens the floodgates effectively for any corporation to say digital content is, legally speaking, not property, which many of them have argued over the years. I have been warning you guys about this for over a decade, that this stuff is not property and can be seized from you at any time. And the reason you should be buying physical is to avoid exactly this. Now, a lot of my audience in particular is smart and does that. However, I'm not the biggest YouTuber. Many people have never heard me talk about this. It happens. I understand that. And I just feel bad that we are reaching that point, because if Ubisoft wins, that's likely the direction it goes. And unfortunately, it's very unlikely that the lawsuit will work in the case of the plaintiff, which would be the people suing Ubisoft over this. Effectively, if they do win somehow, that actually can set a precedent for what is defined as digital property and how to redefine it. So even if you don't live in the state of California, even if you do not live in the United States, this outcome will have massive ramifications, not only in the video game industry, but in the movie industry, in the music industry. Anything you download digitally, play digitally, and you believed you are the owner of, this lawsuit can legally define and then spread out throughout the world what is property.
It's not even digital, really.
No, it's horribly depressing, because it will also set the precedent that, so a lot of this is where this actually, bring it back around to the Switch 2. In this scenario, if Ubisoft wins this and it's determined that game companies, movie companies, distributors of digital content are actively not selling you property, which, by the way, even the EULA of Steam says exactly this, that this content is not property. If they win this, it means things like Nintendo now has absolutely no roadblocks other than maybe bad PR to just stop a game they don't want you to have access to anymore. Digitally. Like the games, if you bought it physically, bought it digitally, doesn't matter, it stops working. Did you know that it is actually possible for them to update Blu-ray players and make it so discs don't function?
Yeah.
You knew that. So, like, there can be...
I knew that Blu-ray players had updates, so...
Yeah, but there is actually a method by which they can simply update them for specific movies to not work. So one of the things within the film industry, and guys like me who are really passionate about that, say like, no, I want the physical edition because if it comes off Disney Plus or it comes off HBO Max or Netflix or whatever, like nothing's taking this away from me. However, more modern updates for modern Blu-ray devices, actually Sony just put out a PS3 update specifically for this kind of thing, was for Blu-ray support. If a company has a movie on their service and then decides, for whatever reason, we don't want that movie up there anymore, effectively turning it into lost media. This does happen for various reasons on various streaming services. And you go, well, the physical edition endures. They now, legally speaking, would have the ability, not just the technical ability, which they've always had, they would legally have the ability to update everything so that physical edition you bought 20 years earlier no longer works. That is terrifying. Now, granted, I'm sure a lot of us would find our ways around it, don't get me wrong, but it sucks that we're moving in this direction of like complete digital dependency, total abolition of consumer rights just for convenience. So even though I always had a very good relationship with Ubisoft, and I actually legitimately see why they think the way they do in this situation, I do very seriously hope they lose this for the sake of the rights of ownership. But unfortunately, my money is on them to win this. Sadly.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my whole long thing. What you got?
Kind of the same thoughts. It's like, God, like I didn't even realize, like, when I was reading about this, that the crew was released physically. Like, hearing that and being like, okay, like, as soon as you mentioned that, it's like, oh crap, this lawsuit's even more important than I thought it was. But
it's very significant. It's not just about one game and one company and one state and one precedent, blah, blah, blah. This would have ripple effects throughout the entire Western world. Yeah, this would be pretty significant. And you should care. Unfortunately, there's nothing you can do unless they have like a legal defense fund. But I think it's already in the hands of the judge to make the final decision. I don't think there's anything else to do.
At this point to do any more argument, I think.
In fact, I don't know when the decision on this is expected to come in. It could roll in after we've recorded, but before this is released. I genuinely don't know. But we'll find out as soon as possible. Just hope that Ubisoft lost this one. And even if they do lose it, by the way, the worst part about that is it doesn't protect anything. All it does is say in this scenario, this worked out this way, and inevitably the same thing's going to happen over and over again.
Yeah.
The sad truth is, the laws on this have to change, but at least in the United States, I can tell you right now that's not going to happen anytime soon because our Congress is what the average age of Congress is like 75.
Yeah.
Like this isn't changing anytime soon. It's not going to change until millennials are the ones in power because Gen X just doesn't seem interested in being adults, so they're never there to do any jobs. But as far as government jobs, but it's just how it is. There's just not enough of them. That's really their problem.
Yeah, or there's too many people who are older than them who are still getting elected.
Well, that's the problem, is that the boomers were such a massive generation and Gen X was such a small one. They've always overshadowed them. Gen X will have some brief hiccup in there, but they're also going to get overshadowed by millennials because of how massively we overnumber them. They'll just deal with that on both ends. That, and I think Abdullah and I talked about it earlier. Demographics, like the elderly just live longer and longer, so that's why the boomers are still there. But anyway, that's a whole different discussion.
Yeah.
So I would think the laws on this have some chance of changing, but man, like realistically, this could be another 20 years. Like, and by then, who even cares? Like, it'd be such the norm at that point. So I don't know. It's kind of depressing, but yay! It's a fun video game podcast.
Well,
woo!
Hey, at least for those of us who do buy stuff digitally, at least on PC, at least GOG still exists for now.
Yeah, I was gonna say for now is the key word there. Like,
yeah,
for those who made that point, I'm glad he brought that up. GOG would not be immune to this either. Like, this would change a lot of things. Like, companies could choose to enact DRM even through distribution systems like GOG if they really wanted to. Like, this is bad. So, like, you know, there's that meme of all those people who are like holding a sword and aiming it to the center, and all these groups that usually disagree, and then the center thing is the mutual evil they all disagree on, or they all agree on, they hate. That lawsuit is this moment. Unfortunately, there's nothing any of us can do about it.
Nope.
So just pay attention because this is going to impact you. And
I think,
you know,
as far as
go ahead.
DRM goes with GOG, at least right now, I don't think that they can, because I don't think CD Projekt Red actually lets them. But like, if the game has any multiplayer component, and or if it's like The Crew and it's only available online, and it's not DRM that's what's killing it, it's just killing the servers. That's still a thing that can happen.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like I keep saying, like this would allow that in perpetuity. You'd essentially be agreeing. The legal result of all of this is the end. You would essentially be agreeing that every game purchase, I say that in quotations, is a rental, and you have access to it as long as the creator of that content allows you to have it. Now, none of us are that stupid that when we went to the store in the 90s and we bought a Super Nintendo game or whatever, that we thought we owned the rights of those games Nobody thought that. Nobody thought you could clone it and legally you could do that. But we did have a certain expectation that that copy of that game would work as long as we possessed it, or as long as, we didn't damage it or whatever, normal wear and tear use. At no point was there an expectation that, hey man, I bought Aladdin on the SNES, which was actually made by Capcom, by the way. I bought it back in 1992, 1993, whatever it was. It's now 2025. Capcom is going to show up to my house and say you're not allowed to have that anymore.
Yeah.
Imagine how ridiculous that scenario sounds.
Jeez.
Unfortunately, that's effectively the scenario we're in, except they don't bother to show up at your house. They just take it away from you from a distance. And this would set the legal precedent that they're always just allowed to do that.
Yep.
So be wary.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, nothing you can really do other than be upset, I suppose.
Yeah, like once this lawsuit's over and like if Ubisoft wins, it's going to be like you said, it would set the precedent that they're allowed to do that, but it would mean that they'll be allowed to do that for like reasons that's not just necessarily the servers are too expensive to keep up, no one's playing it. Like they could then just do it for whatever, and there's nothing anyone can do about it.
Precisely. Like, let me look at it this way. So Nintendo, bringing it around to Switch 2 again. Nintendo is going to release the Switch 2, and they obviously care about putting Breath of the Wild on there, and Tears of the Kingdom on there, the more definitive editions, whatever. However, the Wii U version of that game, even the original Switch versions of that game, will inevitably be cheaper. Under this lawsuit, it would allow Nintendo to update the Wii U and update the Switch so that those physical editions of those games simply do not function anymore because they want to push you to buy the newer, more expensive release. They would legally have the right to do that.
Yep.
Forget the morality side. It would become completely illegal that every game purchase is that but a rental. And unfortunately, because we've become so digitally dependent, products you already think you own, things going back, like even 20 years now, would allowed to be updated for that purpose. Like there's nothing, if that lawsuit goes forward, dude, I'm not saying they will do this. Keep in mind, we're not saying the second the midnight drops, whatever, that every game goes offline. I'm not predicting doom and gloom here. But legally speaking, Sony could update the PS4 10 seconds after that if they wanted to, and take away anything they don't want you to have access to. The PS4. Hell, they could do that with the PS3 if they really wanted to. Granted, piracy will have to save us all, because that's like the one thing that ever keeps this stuff at bay. And it's ridiculous, and I've said this in videos over the past, it is ridiculous that they are setting up that kind of situation, that kind of battle, where they want, I'm not saying they want piracy, but they're creating it as the only alternative to legitimate means, which is insane.
Yeah.
But it is what it is.
And the stupid thing, like, this lawsuit wouldn't have happened if the crew just had, like, a basic, like, single-player mode that could function without the servers.
Precisely.
Like,
Precisely.
Ugh.
And just to be clear on the lawsuit itself, because a lot of people are like, yeah, but there's been like, like World of Warcraft, like games that are like online dependent for far longer than that. Like, why is the crew significant? The crew is significant because it was released in an era where you were expected to be able to play this game as a product. You go into World of Warcraft understanding it's effectively a service. This is not how this worked, particularly when this game came out. And so we'll see what happens with that.
Yep.
I sit there and I think, like, how depressing this really is, because, like, we fought so hard as a squad back in 2013 to prevent exactly this. And I feel like it feels like the Terminator movies, like, Judgment Day is inevitable. All you did was postpone it. Like, that's all we did.
Yeah.
We kicked the can down the road a few years before the nukes went off.
Yep, we kicked the can until most of us were now too old to argue about it.
We're not. We're too mature. We just don't care anymore. And like if we have kids, they don't care. Gen Z doesn't really care. And
there's a lot. There's a lot more. There's a lot of other stuff issues that are going. Like, yeah, consumer rights are important, but look outside the window. Everything's on fire.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of other rights that matter too. It's just what it is. This was my cause. We helped. Let it endure for a few more years, but inevitably it goes. And the sad part is, we never were unaware of that. Like, I've been talking about this for so long that I remember going back in the day, people were like, it's inevitable. I'm like, yeah, I always knew it was inevitable. I was never unaware of that. Just because I wanted to prevent it as long as possible doesn't mean I didn't know the ship was eventually going to sink.
Right.
I just wanted to save as many lives as we could in the process, you know?
Yeah.
And we did the best we could, but here we are. So, on that horribly depressing note, anything else you want to say about this or Switch 2 or anything?
No.
Skippity dibbity. All right.
Yeah.
All right. End on a goof. All right. So huge shout out to you, Joseph. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Spencer. Of course. Sorry for depressing the crap out of everybody. Spencer Puryear, thank you very much for that subject. Obviously earlier, Sinjeet and Abdullah for joining me. Shout outs as well to Jeb Malcolm, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, Trey Wagner as well. So once again, Spencer Puryear, Sinjeet, Jeb Malcolm, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, Trey Wagner, obviously Abdullah, and as well as you again, Joseph. Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you very much to everybody who listened to this. Please like, comment, subscribe. Check out all the social media stuff in the description. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, Spreadshirt, etc. Especially Patreon. You know, you can support this podcast. You can support all my videos. You can keep me on the internet talking to you guys about this kind of stuff. Because I don't do sponsorships. I don't do ads. I just try to bring you guys interesting content as best I can. And I am a relic, much like physical media, but much like physical media, I haven't quite died yet. So let's keep me around if you're at all willing. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all later.